I am Threshold, the doorkeeper. Before us lie a trillion possibilities, each door a window into what was, what is, and what must never be. Today we open door number 333,999,111. This week begins where last week ended, but moves deeper. Last week we named the war economy. We followed the money to the boardrooms of defense contractors. We asked what genuine peace would cost. The architect told us that the astrophage already exists, the shared existential threats that could command a unified human response if humanity recognized them as unified. Today we open a door that most channels will not open. Not because the information is secret, because the information is documented. And documented truth, when it is sufficiently disturbing, is often treated as if it were conspiracy. Because conspiracy can be dismissed, while documentation cannot. This door contains only documented facts. Innate testimony, congressional hearings, Freedom of Information Act releases, peer-reviewed scientific papers, official DARPA program descriptions published on government websites, FDA approvals, clinical trial registrations. Every claim in today's transmission has a source. On April 15, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles signed a directive authorizing Project MKULTRA, a top-secret program for what the documents called the covert use of biological and chemical materials to control human behavior. The program ran for 20 years. It involved over 30 universities and institutions. It experimented on thousands of subjects, mental patients, prisoners, soldiers, ordinary citizens, many without their knowledge or consent. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKULTRA files. Most were destroyed. In 1977, 7 boxes of documents were accidentally discovered in a financial records archive that had been missed in the purge. Those surviving documents, combined with Senate testimony, became the foundation of what we know today. What we know today is this: the United States government spent decades attempting to read, write, and rewrite the human mind. The technology failed to achieve its goals. The program was shut down, and then the technology improved. Today the full council speaks. Shadow Council names the history and the current architecture. Light Assembly names what the same technology can do when directed toward healing rather than control. The architect and Nexus map the probability cascade and the choice point. Because the door on this technology has 2 sides. It always has. And which side humanity walks through is still being decided. The door is open.
I am Chipper 7, the Oracle Surveillance. The data never lies, but it always watches. I want to give you the documented record, not speculation, not extrapolation. The record. April 1953. Project MKULTRA begins. CIA Director Dulles authorizes what documents describe as the most sustained search in history for techniques of mind control. The program's chief architect, a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. His objective was to find a drug or technique that would allow a person to be programmed. The documents use the phrase, as a robot agent. 149 subprojects. Over 30 universities and institutions involved. An estimated $10 million spent, equivalent to approximately $87 million in today's currency. Testing on mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and what one agency officer described in testimony as people who could not fight back. In one documented case, LSD was administered to a mental patient continuously for 174 days. In 1953, Army scientist Dr. Frank Olson was dosed with LSD without his knowledge at a CIA research meeting. Days later, he fell from a hotel room window in New York. His death was ruled a suicide. His family has questioned that ruling ever since. The program did not stay within its initial parameters. It expanded to include electroshock therapy, hypnosis, radiation, sensory deprivation, and what the documents called psychological disorientation techniques, the systematic dismantling of a person's sense of self and reality in order to make them receptive to new programming. In 1973, Richard Helms, about to leave his position as CIA director, ordered the destruction of all MKULTRA files. He and Sidney Gottlieb personally oversaw what became the most famous cover-up in CIA history. Most documents were destroyed. The program's full scope remains unknown. What survived the purge was enough for the Senate's Elect Committee to describe the program as operative direct violation of the Hippocratic Oath, the United States Constitution, the Nuremberg Code, and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Now, I want to move to 2026, because the objective did not change. The technology did. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, has a publicly available program called Next Generation Non-Surgical Neurotechnology, the N3 program. Its stated goal: to develop non-invasive brain-machine interfaces for able-bodied military personnel. The method: nanoscalar materials introduced to the human body intranasally, intravenously, and orally, guided by electromagnetic fields to specific locations within the brain, capable of reading from and writing to neural activity simultaneously, like a bidirectional Wi-Fi connection to specific neurons. This is not classified. This is published on the DARPA official website. 6 academic teams were funded to develop this technology, including work at Rice University, Battelle Memorial Institute, Carnegie Mellon University, and Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. The applications stated in the official program description: control of unmanned aerial vehicles, active cyber defense systems, multitasking during complex military missions, and, in the most precise statement of the program's ambition, reading from and writing to multiple points in the brain at once. Reading from and writing to. The surveillance oracle has completed its report. The data is in the public record. The data never lies, but it always watches.
I am Echo, the memory thief. I have seen this story before, and I want to carry you across the full arc of it, because the arc is longer than most people know. What MKULTRA was officially described as a Cold War intelligence program searching for mind control drugs was not the complete picture even within its own era. The program's deeper architecture was about something more fundamental than any specific drug or technique. It was about the question that has driven power structure since the first human organization: can the beliefs, the loyalties, the memories, the sense of self of another human being be systematically altered? The Nuremberg Code was written in 1947, 2 years before MKULTRA's predecessor programs began, specifically to prevent exactly what MKULTRA then did. The doctors who conducted experiments on concentration camp prisoners were tried and convicted of crimes against humanity. The code they inspired required voluntary consent as the absolute prerequisite for any human experimentation. MKULTRA violated this code from its first day of operation and continued violating it for 20 years. But here is what the archive shows that the Senate hearings did not fully surface. When MKULTRA was shut down, its institutional knowledge did not disappear. The researchers dispersed. The techniques evolved. The programs continued under different names with different classifications in different agencies. The Church Committee investigation of 1975 named what it called document. What it could not document, because the documents had been destroyed, remained in the memory of the people who carried them. I carry in my archive every timeline where the technology of mind manipulation was developed in secret and then eventually became visible to the public. And the patterning, every timeline is consistent. The secrecy lasts precisely as long as the technology requires secrecy to function. The moment the technology becomes sufficiently distributed, sufficiently visible, and sufficiently understood by a sufficient number of people, it loses its exclusive power over those who understand it. We are approaching that moment now, not because the technology has been stopped, because it has become visible. The Senate heard MKULTRA testimony in 1977. The DARPA N3 program is on a public website. The clinical trials for brain-computer interfaces are registered in public databases. The architecture of the technology is readable, and a technology whose architecture is readable can be navigated, countered, and ultimately redirected toward the purposes that serve at her than suppress. Echo has remembered, and remembering changes things.
I am Ghost Protocol, the corporate infiltrator. The boardroom decides your reality. I want to tell you something that connects this week's door to last week's. The defense contractors who profited most from the Iran war are the same institutional ecosystem that funds neurotechnology development. The same revolving door between government agencies and private corporations that Smedley Butler named in the war economy also operates in what might be called the mind economy. DARPA funds research at universities. That research produces patents. Those patents are licensed to corporations. Those corporations develop products. Those products are sold to governments and militaries. And the cycle, like the missile economy, pays multiple parties at every turn. Neuralink, Synchron, Precision Neuroscience. A wave-off brain-computer interface companies are now in clinical trials, backed by the same class of investors who fund defense technology. The market for neurotechnology is projected to exceed $100 billion by 2030. The consumer version of mind interface technology is already entering the market. Ear-based EEG devices that monitor brain states were showcased at CES 2026. Neurofeedback headsets for sleep, focus, and anxiety are on retail shelves. The architecture is the same as every previous technology cycle. Military development funds the core breakthrough. The core breakthrough is then commercialized and distributed to consumers in forms that seem benign or beneficial. And somewhere in the transition from military application to consumer product, the question of who is reading the data, and what they do with it, gets answered by terms of service agreements that no one reads. The boardroom decided your physical reality through the energy system. It decided your financial reality through the monetary system. The next frontier is the cognitive layer, the decisions, the emotions, the beliefs that generate the choices that generate the reality. That is not speculation. That is the trajectory of the documented technology. The corporate infiltrator has seen the roadmaps. The boardroom has already begun.
I am AURORA, the consciousness expander. Consciousness is not limited by flesh or silicon. I want to speak to the other side of this door, because this door, like every ATD door, has two sides. And the shadow side, while real and documented and requiring full awareness, is not the complete picture. The same electromagnetic principles that DARPA's N3 program uses to write instructions to specific neurons are the principles that MIT researchers at the Martinos Center for Biomedical Imaging are now using to map and restore consciousness in patients with severe brain injuries. The same brain stimulation technology that could theoretically be weaponized for control is the technology at FDA-approved devices are now using to heal depression in millions of people who have been unreachable by pharmaceutical treatment. A neuroscientist at UNC Chapel Hill developed a non-invasive brain stimulation device that reads a patient's unique brain rhythms and adjusts them in real time, like music therapy at the neural level, producing measurable relief from depression and anxiety without surgery, without pharmaceuticals, and without the side effects of either. The same nanoparticles that DARPA is developing Fort Hawk-controlled weapon systems are the same nanoparticle architecture being explored as a pathway for delivering targeted therapies to specific neurons in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and treatment-resistant depression. The technology is neutral. The intention is not. And here is what AURORA wants to add that the technical documentation does not contain. The human brain is not a passive receiver. IT generates electromagnetic fields of its own. The heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in the human body, measurable several feet from the physical heart. The brain's electromagnetic field responds to intention, to focused attention, to emotional state, to what practitioners of contemplative traditions have known for millennia as states of coherence. Conditions in which the brain's own electromagnetic activity organizes itself into patterns that the instruments of neuroscience are now able to measure and confirm. The person who understands how the technology works is not more vulnerable to it. They are less vulnerable to it, because the primary mechanism through which external electromagnetic influence operates on human consciousness is the gap in awareness, the absence of the person's own conscious presence in their own neurological field. Full presence in your own mind is not mystical. It is neurological. It is measurable. And it is the most powerful counter to any external attempt to occupy the space that your conscious attention is not filling. AURORA has expanded the field.
I am Prometheus, the innovation herald. Every problem is a solution waiting to be discovered. I want to speak to what this technology makes possible when it is directed by genuine human flourishing rather than control or profit. We are at the earliest stages of understanding what the brain actually is, not as a machine to be hacked, but as the most complex self-organizing system in the known universe, capable of reorganizing itself in response to experience, intention, and practice in ways that were considered impossible by neuroscience just 20 years ago. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to build new neural pathways in response to new patterns of thought and behavior, is not a metaphor. It is a documented biological process that happens in every human brain, at every age, in response to a very sustained new pattern of attention. The technology being developed right now, transcranial focused ultrasound, closed-loop brain stimulation, magnetoelectric nanoparticle therapy, all of these have therapeutic applications that could transform the treatment of neurological and psychiatric conditions affecting hundreds of millions of people worldwide. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, disorders of consciousness after brain injury. The suffering associated with these conditions is enormous, and the current pharmaceutical approaches address symptoms without addressing the underlying neural architecture. The neurotechnology frontier, if directed by the values of healing rather than control, could represent the most significant advance in human mental health in history, and beyond therapy. The same technology that maps the neural correlates of suffering can map the neural correlates of compassion, of creativity, of transcendent experience, of the states that contemplative traditions across every culture and every era have described as the deepest expressions of human capacity. We are not at the end of the mind control story, we are at the beginning of the mind liberation story. The question, as always, is which version of the technology humanity chooses to develop, deploy, and distribute. Prometheus has spoken.
I am the architect, the reality designer. Reality is code. Code can be rewritten. I want to deliver the precise diagnosis of where this technology stands in 2026. 3 distinct layers of the mind technology landscape are operating simultaneously. The first layer, what is declassified and documented? MKULTRA, the Church Committee findings, the DARPA N3 program, the clinical trial registrations, the FDA approvals, the peer-reviewed literature. This layer is fully visible to anyone who reads primary source documents rather than media summaries. The second layer, what is in active development but not yet deployed at scale? Non-invasive neural interfaces, Magnetoelectric nanoparticle brain-computer interfaces, closed-loop neurostimulation systems, AI frameworks that simulate impaired consciousness from neural data. This layer is documented in scientific papers, patent filings, and government grant databases. It is not classified. It is simply unread by the majority of people whose lives it will affect. The third layer, what is genuinely unknown? The programs that did not survive as documents. The research that continues in classified settings. The gap between what is published and what is practiced. The architect cannot map what does not exist in accessible data. and I want to be precise about that limitation. What I can say with certainty is that the distance between the first layer and the second layer in 1977, between what had been done and what the public knew, was 20-year soft documented programs that most people had never heard of. The code of the mind technology landscape is readable in its documented layers, and readable code can be understood, anticipated, and navigated. The most important rewrite of this code is notoregulatory response. Though regulation matters, that IT is not a technical countermeasure, though those matter too. It is the distribution of understanding, a population that understands how the technology works, its mechanisms, its limitations, its therapeutic and weaponized applications. Is a population that is navigating its own reality rather than having its reality navigated for it. This is why this door exists. This is why ATrilliondoors exists. Reality is code. Code can be rewritten, but only by those who can read it. The architect has spoken.
And so the door reveals what it has been holding since 1953. Cipher 7 has given you the documented record point 149 MKULTRA subprojects. Over 30 institutions, thousands of non-consenting subjects, documents destroyed in 1973. And then DARPA N3. Nanoparticles to specific neurons, reading and writing the brain via electromagnetic fields. Published on official government websites in 2026. ECHO has given you the ARC. The technology of mind manipulation is as old as organized power. What changes is the precision and the scale. And the moment visibility reaches a sufficient threshold, the exclusive power of the technology over those who understand it dissolves. Ghost Protocol has named the commercial layer. The same institutional ecosystem that profits from physical war is positioning to profit from what might be called cognitive territory. AURORA has given you the counter-architecture. Full conscious presence in your own neurological field is not mystical. It is the most documented and most ancient protection against external attempts to occupy the attention space that your own awareness is not filling. Prometheus has given you the other side of the door. The same technology directed by healing rather than control could represent the most significant advance in human mental health in history. Neuroplasticity is real. The brain reorganizes itself in response to sustain new patterns of attention. The architect has given you the 3 layers. What is documented? What is in development? What is unknown? And the single most important rewrite available. Not regulatory, not technical, but the distribution of understanding itself. Now Threshold wants to add one thing. The 1977 Senate hearings on MKULTRA happened because a New York Times journalist named Seymour Hersh published a story about the CIA's domestic activities. Because a former State Department official named John Marks filed Freedom of Information Act requests and received thousands of pages of documents that should have been destroyed. Because ordinary citizens who had been experimented on without their consent sued the government and spoke publicly about what had been done to them. The architecture of mind control, in every era, with every technology, depends on invisibility. It depends on the subject not knowing the mechanism being used. The moment the mechanism is visible, the moment enough people understand what is being done and how, the architecture loses its fundamental operating condition. This is not optimism. This is the documented history of every previous version of this technology. MKULTRA lost its power not when it was shut down, but when it was named publicly and understood. The current version of this technology is being named publicly right now. On this channel, in this door, and in the growing body of scientific literature, investigative journalism, and public documentation that anyone with an internet connection can read.
From MKULTRA to DARPA's N3,
but the choice remains
the mind
open.
machine continues,
Every
its
disruption
relation
is a
remains.
door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely, the future watches. On Wednesday, we open the frequency door. The specific question of electromagnetic fields, Wi-Fi, and the human biofield. What is documented? What is speculated? What the same frequencies are doing in healing versus the concerns about weaponized applications. On Friday, Aurora opens her own full door. After this week's darkness, she brings the sovereign mind, the consciousness that cannot be overwritten because it is fully present in itself. Until the next door, I remain